I'm Allie. I am the social media editor for Cascade PBS, and I'm here with Nick Zentner of Nick on the Rocks. We're going to do a little Q&A of fun questions that people have sent us over the last season. So buckle up. There are some very good questions that
I
people
love it, Allie, and thank you for working so hard. You do so much for that channel. It's just so great. So thank you.
thank you. We'll start with a softball. What is your favorite peak or volcano in the Pacific Northwest?
All right, man. I'm not going to overthink these things. So my favorite peak is Mount Stewart. It's the high point in the Stewart Range, and it's a jaggedy, beautiful Teton-like mountain range just to the north of my campus. I'm literally pointing to the north through the snow, and I'm pretending I can see it right now, but it is a local landmark. Folks that drive on I-90 west from Ellensburg to Seattle maybe are surprised by this beautiful, jagged mountain range. They're not sure what it is, but it's Mount Stewart. There's granite up there that's 93 million years old, and there's a really set of unusual ideas tied to that mountain. So that's easy. Mount Stewart.
Nice. And what is your favorite type of rock and why?
Again, I promise I'm not going to overthink these, right, Allie? Let's see. It's hard to beat a beautiful salt and pepper looking granite. I mean, it's just aesthetically gorgeous, and some up in the Cascades, like the Index Pluton or the Squire Creek Pluton. These are magma chamber rocks that cooled underground in the dark, and here they are up in the high peaks of the Cascades. And so they have a story to tell as well, but just the beautiful quartz, feldspar, micas, hard to beat granite.
Agreed. We have a lot of granite on the East Coast, and so I'm like
Yes.
used to seeing granite when I go hiking.
Well, that's another angle on this. I grew up in Wisconsin where there was no granite. It was just a bunch of sandstone and limestone. So I feel like a little thrill, like, wow, I'm not in the Midwest anymore. I get to see beautiful granite.
What are the fault lines in the Seattle area?
Well, there is something called the Seattle Fault, and it runs east-west right underneath downtown. And that fault was discovered. That fault was first suspected back in the mid 1960s, and then it was confirmed with some geophysical imaging in the early 1990s. And we know the last earthquake on the Seattle Fault was a little more than 1,000 years ago, and there's concern about the future with that fault. So that's a fault line, as people say. We just kind of call them faults. They're cracks in the bedrock. But there's the Tacoma Fault. There's the South Whidbey Island Fault. The more geologists look, the more faults they find. Insert punchline there. And um, yeah, it's the next step, the next generation of work on those faults is to figure out how many past earthquakes and what are the dates on those past earthquakes so we can know a rough idea of the recurrence interval, as we call it, the average number of years between events. But it's unfortunately not a quiet story in the past, and it's not a quiet story in our future either. So it's serious business.
Okay, this is me because you just sparked a question. How do you figure out past earthquakes on a fault?
It's not easy. What you try to find are layers that you can get an age on, and then if you can figure out how much that layer has been broken, so the layer you assume was a nice even layer before, you get the age, and then uh-oh, now it's broken, so I know the earthquake happens after the layer was made and it was broken X amount. So volcanic ash layers, we can get an age on. A layer of mud with a bunch of organic material, we can get an age on. Maybe it's a granite that's been broken, but quite often they're quite young dates, and so things like granite don't work. We need to use radiocarbon years on some of these formations or some of these layers. So it's delicate, creative work to try to get the age. And if it was easy, we'd have a bunch of past earthquake ages on every fault, but it's not easy.
Hmm. Okay, we're gonna do some of the very specific questions.
Good. Mix it up.
Uh, um, how did the Chehalis Gap form, and how does it influence the climate of Western Washington?
Okay, how many passes do I get? Do I get three cards that pass? I've never heard of the Chehalis Gap. I don't know about climate or weather. So I can guess I can't even guess. Pass.
Okay. Um, is there an estimate for how long it will take before the Juan de Fuca plate completely subsides under the North American plate? And will new Cascade volcanoes form during that time?
Love it. That's a great question. I'm pausing because there is disagreement about the future, of course, in science. But I think the most conventional answer is there's another 5 million years before the North American continent completes the job of crossing a spreading ridge off the coast of Washington. So 50 million years ago, there was a big spreading ridge that was making brand new lava and erupting volcanoes. And that ridge is still out there, but it's a short line segment compared to a much longer line segment that was out there long ago. So that means the Pacific Northwest has been slowly but surely drifting over this active volcano making thing. And so that's called the Juan de Fuca Ridge, which is making the Juan de Fuca plate come our way and making the Pacific plate go towards Japan. So a simple answer is 5 million years from now. And as we understand Cascade volcanoes currently, Cascade volcanoes, individual cones only last for about 2 million years before they just die and crumble away. And then there's a new Cascade volcano that pops up nearby tied to the subduction of the Juan de Fuca plate. So yeah, there's probably a few more dozen cones that will live and die before we totally transform into something called a San Andreas fault.
Yay. Um, okay. This is like so specific.
That's good.
On the Snow Lake Trail, so out
Yeah,
like by
yep,
Alpental,
right.
there is a rock formation with veins of quartz
Mhm.
going through basalt. How was that formed?
Through basalt. So Snow Lake is near Snoqualmie Pass, and there's something called the Snoqualmie batholith, which is a huge volume of granite that's about 21 million years old. Although we're learning new things about that granite, and maybe it's not 21, but it's in that neighborhood. If there's veins of quartz, that doesn't surprise me. And the quartz veins are forming when that magma chamber rock is deep. So there's high pressure. We're squirting this quartz into these cracks like toothpaste into a bathroom wall. Well, I don't know. And so there's gold and quartz and other things that are associated, quartz crystals associated with that. I'm unaware of basalt up at the Snow Lake trailhead. So basalt is a very dark looking rock. And I don't doubt the question, but I've only done that hike a few times and I was mostly just trying to catch my breath and probably missed the basalt squirt there. But yeah, the veins are talking about depth, and those magma chambers, those granites are formed at depth, and now they've been lifted way above the freeway.
It is a very challenging hike.
Yeah,
I've only done it once and I don't know if I'm going to do it
it's
again.
beautiful up there, but you gotta work to get those views. Totally, yes.
Yeah. The last time Mount Rainier erupted, did she produce obsidian?
Could be, but the image that comes to mind for the last major eruption of Mount Rainier is 5,600 years ago, where the whole northeastern part of the mountain gave way and slid down the White River Valley, and that landslide converted into a volcanic mud flow known as a lahar, and that made it all the way to Commencement Bay in Tacoma and created the lowlands down between Tacoma and Enumclaw. And the Enumclaw Plain is nothing but that material. I don't associate obsidian with that. In fact, I don't know of any ash or any lavas on Mount Rainier that are from that 5,600-year-old event. And Mount Rainier has been active since 5,600 years ago, but not in a major way like we know from that Osceola mudflow that I'm talking about. So there's plenty of obsidian up there, but I don't know of it being the most recent eruption.
What kind of eruption would produce obsidian versus like a lahar?
Well, that's the tricky thing with these Cascade volcanoes. There's such different kinds of lava with different stickiness and viscosity that you can go from obsidian, which is very stiff. Volcanic glass is just the most toothpastey-like stuff, all the way down to basalt, which is also possible with an eruption of Rainier or any other cone where you have runny Hawaiian-like lava. So I guess the obsidian would be tied to a very explosive thing, almost like Crater Lake National Park down in southern Oregon. But I don't think we want to think about the potential for that with Rainier. It is real, but
Yeah.
that's too much. We've got other things to worry about. We don't need to worry about that.
I mean, I have a piece of um hummus from Lassen. So
Okay, yeah, yeah. Well, there's a great example. So there's that with Lassen. St. Helens did something totally different. Rainier will do something totally different yet. It's a dealer's choice for what these cones are capable of, and it's fascinating and also terrifying at the same time.
yeah. All right. What else? What other weird questions?
So who sent in these questions? Were they viewers of the PBS in general, or specifically Nick on the Rocks? How did you set this up?
I posted a graphic that said "Ask Nick," and I said we were doing this Q&A, and so if you have questions, send them to me. So we got questions sent to us on Facebook and Instagram and
Nice.
Threads. So yeah,
Well, I can see their thought process. They're like, yeah, those are short programs. They're probably short because I don't think that guy knows that much, and so I'm just going to embarrass him in front of everybody. And it worked. The Chehalis Gap question,
I
mission
think most
accomplished.
I think most people have actually watched your like 3 hour lectures.
Maybe so. Yeah, and they just woke up.
There have been a lot of people actually saying, please make these longer. These are too short.
They are pretty
So
short, I have to say. I
they
like I
are.
clear by the time I get done clearing my throat, the thing's over with. So yeah,
Okay. Somebody wants to know the origin of Mission Peak and Mission Ridge between Ellensburg and Wenatchee because it looks like they say it looks like the rim of a caldera.
I like the thought process there, and I love that area. This is just north of my town, Ellensburg, Washington, and this is a beautiful ski area halfway between Ellensburg and Wenatchee, and it's a beautiful ridge. There's a steep face. I understand why it appears to be a caldera, but most everybody, including me, and I'm not usually a conventional thinker, but even I can see that it's the edge of some giant lava flows. And that steep cliff is because lava flows that were erupting in eastern Washington and were flowing towards the Cascades appeared to just stop right at Mission Ridge. And I was just doing a program on that recently, like a few days ago. They probably didn't stop right there. Those giant lavas that erupted from over by Idaho and started flowing west towards the Cascades probably flowed much further west into the Cascades, possibly even crossing the Cascades when they were lower. But there's been a lot of erosion and landslides since that time. So instead of Mission Ridge being the edge of a caldera, bonus points for creativity. And I like looking for caldera margins. The bedrock itself says everything east of Mission Ridge is thick basalt. Everything west of Mission Ridge is not basalt at all. So it's a big geologic boundary where the eroded edges of those giant lava flows exist. Mission Ridge, cool area for sure.
Get out to Eastern Washington this
Yes,
summer.
we're not that far away, Allie. Come on now, fire up the Volkswagen and get over here.
I know, I need to. We just got a new tent for camping, so maybe I'll
Perfect.
come camping.
Yes.
Somebody else has a question about the Goldendale boulders. They want to know where they came from and how they got there. They said that they're river-rounded boulders the size of cars that are buried in the ground north of town.
Well, I'm with this person. I think there's a couple stories down in the Goldendale, Washington area that are unresolved. And I have snooped around and asked who I can ask, and it's unsatisfying. Uh, there were some ice age floods that came through that area. The ice age floods, a lot of water was coming through the Columbia River Gorge, and Goldendale is not far from Hood River, let's say, in Oregon, or I'm trying to think of other places that people would know, downstream of Tri-Cities. And so the elevation of those rocks, uh, the conventional answer is it's too high for the ice age floods. There were no floods of water that were that high to leave those big rocks. And then I go, okay, well, but they're everywhere. What is the answer? Well, it's kind of lava that eroded in place to just leave those boulders. And I'm like, it doesn't sound right to me. So I don't know what options we have. I don't have any words of wisdom, but I agree with the person asking the question. I think those rocks haven't been looked at carefully enough yet. There's a story there, and I don't think we have it.
Maybe that should be a new episode of Nick on the Rocks.
I was thinking about it. I don't know if there's enough dramatic scenery. Maybe if we tie it to something in the gorge, and there were some lavas that were erupting on uh, in the Simcoe volcanic field. Maybe that could work. And maybe they are tied to the Simcoe volcanic field somehow, which is like 4 million years old. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know if we need dramatic scenery. I don't know if it's quite dramatic enough right there at Goldendale. No offense if you live. I always stop there at the McDonald's, so I'm partial to Goldendale. This episode brought to you by McDonald's.
Yeah.
Goldendale.
All right, we're gonna do some more softballs.
But
Um, will the Cascades and Olympics be shorter, taller, or the same in 5 million years?
these are fun questions. Uh, Taller. Uh, Many people are aware now that there's been a lot of geologic study to prove that the crust of the Pacific Northwest is rotating slowly,
What?
clockwise. It's really cool. For 50 million years, like if you just visualize a big windshield wiper and it's just going around the clock and everybody's rotating around Pendleton, Oregon. And for 50 million years, all the crust has been rotating 1 degree every 1 million years around the clock.
Oh,
And so the reason that's important is that Canada is not doing that. Canada is sitting this one out. And so we're doing all this rotation of Northern California, Western Oregon, and Western Washington into this stubborn Canada scene. And we're getting squeezed as a result. And so every ridge in Eastern Washington is slowly lifting. The mountain peaks in the Cascades are slowly lifting. The Olympics are lifting. Fractions of millimeters a year, of course, but they are lifting. So 5 million years, yeah, I think we'll just have more pronounced uplift that we've already had for the last few million years. But if we go back 10 or 20 million years ago, everyone agrees the Cascades were hardly anything. There wasn't much topography. So it's been a recent quote unquote story in the Northwest that these Cascades, if somebody hit a button like 4 million years ago and suddenly the thing's just rising like crazy, it's still a bit of a mystery who hit the button and why 4 million years ago.
oh, that's cool. I had no idea
Yeah.
that we were rotating like that.
Yeah, the rotating thing is really sweet. People love that, and it was totally undetected until like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like thinking back to my college geology class, and I feel like learning about plate tectonics, you really just learn like basic north, south, east, west movements. Nobody's
Right.
talking about any sort of curved movement.
Yeah. And so the reaction then, when somebody hears about the clockwise, they go, oh, so I was taught wrong. I thought North America was moving southwest, and it is. So you're just to your point, Allie. So there's a southwestward moving continent, but within this raft, then the front end of it is doing this rotation thing at the same time. So yeah, like most things, there's a bit more to it when you get beyond the 100 level.
Geology 101.
Yeah, what university geology 101?
Salem State University in Salem, Massachusetts.
Go Tigers,
We're the Vikings.
the Vikings, of course.
But it was a good geology class, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, nice.
All right. What do we know about the composition of the Earth's mantle, and will we ever build a drill that can get a sample of it?
Seems unlikely we would have the technology anytime soon to drill to the mantle. The boundary between the crust and the mantle is a very sharp boundary. And on continents, the average depth to that boundary is about 40 kilometers. So like more than 15 miles down there. We're not even close to, even the Russians are not drilling that deep to get down to the mantle. So we have to rely on volcanic eruptions, taking stuff from the mantle and getting it up here, or some other crazy plate tectonic collisions that we don't really understand yet. What do we know about the composition of the mantle? It's heavy in iron and dark colored minerals. And so when you have mantle coming to the surface, there's lots of greens and browns and blacks. Uh, so it's very different than the overall chemistry of our continents. But beyond that, we don't know a whole lot. And it is a major frontier to finally get into the earth. And I mean, you learned about plate tectonics, but we don't really know why those plates are moving. We don't know why these plates are, what is driving these plates to move every year a few inches? Nobody really has a physical answer for that. You're taught that there's convection in the mantle, like a
Yeah.
boiling pot of water or something, but um, that's not really backed up with much science. It's just an idea.
What? My
Yeah.
geology class is being dismantled bit by bit.
Oh, good one. Dismantled. You got to start somewhere. But yeah, as I tell my 101 students, half the time I'm lying to you just because we don't have enough time to get into all the exceptions to what I'm saying. So we gotta start with some basic concepts. So that works for the accountants in the room.
There you go. Um, if Spokane was once coastal Washington, where are the ocean sediments and fossils?
Well, it's true that there was a time, and in fact, it was not just a brief time, it was hundreds of millions of years of time where the Pacific Ocean waters were lapping up at the beach at Spokane, almost Idaho. Uh, and what evidence do we have for that? There are beach rocks, sands that were on the old beach, stromatolites, which are mounds of blue-green algae, uh, little ripple marks and other things that you see when you go out at low tide there in Puget Lowland and see a bunch of stuff screwing around in the water. But the difference is that beach time in Spokane was so far back in time that there wasn't much life on the planet. This is
Oh,
pre-Cambrian time. So there was no biology except for these little mounds of blue-green algae. There weren't any fishes, there weren't plants, there weren't trees, there weren't humans, there weren't any creatures that were big enough to see and have bones. So if we had the beach in Seattle 20 million years ago or 100 million years ago, we'd have all sorts of fossils to look at. But instead we had the beach at Spokane like 750 million years ago. Too far
gotcha.
back there.
So do we have stromatolites in Spokane that you can see?
Roughly, yeah. There's a group of sedimentary rocks called the Belt Supergroup, and they extend continuously over to Glacier National Park in Montana. And there are some fantastic stromatolite fossils in Glacier and those places in Montana and up to Alberta and BC. And it's less obvious right at Spokane, but those same rocks are continuous through the panhandle of Idaho and in towards the Spokane area. It's really cool. That old shoreline is on many geology maps, and I can't stop now. It wasn't just a beach. Before 750 million years ago, there was another continent that was connected to us at Spokane
What?
that geologists, some like Australia being here, some like Antarctica being here, some like Siberia being here. I'm not making this up now. Come on now, Allie.
I believe
This is
you. You just
and
told me
so
you lie to your students, but I believe you.
well, that's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, the lie would be just to say Antarctica was here for sure. So there's this debate, but the evidence, there were okay. So there were rivers 800 million years ago that were flowing from Idaho onto this mystery continent. Let's just say it's Australia. That's what I think. And then there was a rift 750 million years ago to start breaking Australia away from Spokane, and this new ocean started to grow, known today as the Pacific Ocean. But I mean, that's why we have a beach. Like it wasn't always a beach at Spokane. We formed a beach because we pulled this other continent away. This
Huh.
is geology. This is not your grandpa's geology. Come on, there's a lot of cool stuff we can talk about.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, now I have to ask, like, we only have, where are all of the fossils that we could find in Washington if you're looking for a fossil?
Yeah, our geology department here at Central Washington University does not have a paleontologist, a fossil person, because we typically don't have that many fossils in our state compared to other states. So we need sedimentary rocks to form fossils, and we have so much igneous rocks in Washington because we're so close to this plate boundary that I'll give you some examples. I'll answer your question, but yeah, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of fossils in Alberta or North Dakota or Ohio or something. So in our state, there are beautiful plant fossils north of Ellensburg up towards Bellingham, plant fossils like palm leaves and beautiful tropical plants. But I think maybe you're asking about animal fossils. We hardly
Both.
we've only found a couple dinosaur bones in the entire state so far. And the most famous find was out in the San Juan Island, Sucia Island, and they found a portion of a dinosaur there in the sedimentary rock. But for the most part, those rocks from the dinosaur time are either uh, we weren't depositing a lot of sedimentary material in what is now Washington, or we were, and they've been buried by all this younger volcanic activity. So, as in most cases in geology, you just work with what you have at the surface, and if most of it's in the subsurface, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do really. So, yeah, in the case of going on a dinosaur bone dig in eastern Montana, nothing buried that stuff in the last 60 million years. It's a pretty boring place geologically, so that's great for the Mesozoic, but it's boring for anything younger. We've got the opposite problem. We got all this crazy recent activity, that's why I'm in Washington. I didn't grow up here, but um, to preserve these older chapters is a lot harder.
That makes sense.
Good question. Oh, you're right in the fun here. You're not just reading other
No,
people's questions.
I have questions too.
This is truly organic. Nice.
But okay, wait, I want to find. Oh, what formed the rock formations in the Okanogan Valley between Tonic, I can't even say this,
Hmm.
Penasket and Oroville?
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. I'm pretty weak on Okanagan geology as well. It's in extreme North Washington, North Central Washington. It's really beautiful up there and sparsely populated, and there is good geology up there. Can you tell I'm stalling? Uh, what do I know about Tenasket? I know that there's some exotic terrains from younger than the rifting of Rodinia, which is that. Okay. Uh, if they're asking about a specific set of ridges between Tenasket and somewhere else, I probably don't. I do not. I do. It's official. I do not have an answer. But generally, cartoonishly, there was a crazy Eocene. It's a time period about between 55 and about 35 million years ago where a lot of really weird stuff was going on and the crust was being pulled apart and crust was being lifted. And at the same time, there were big valleys where a bunch of sediment was being deposited. And there's little fragments of those Eocene dynamic stories that are exposed around Wenatchee, they're exposed around Chelan, and then, yeah, there's a lot of exposure up there in the Okanagan. But I keep saying to people that watch my programs, I got to get up to the Okanagan more. I know there's a bunch of great stuff. It's one of the areas that's just a little too far away from my backyard where I don't get up there as often as I should. But I need to add it to my list.
Another episode.
Yeah, no, seriously, like if somebody's watching this and they know about a really cool spot in the Okanagan, would you please email me, Nick Zentner? I'm here at Central Washington University. I'd love to build a Nick on the Rocks episode around something in northern Washington, northeastern Washington, north central Washington that's not Ice Age related. I've done enough Ice Age stuff for a while, I think.
We're getting away from Ice Age next season.
I think we are. Probably doing a bunch of Cascade stuff. I've had Cascades on the brain the last 6 months, so we'll do a bunch of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um, okay, what will happen when the axial seamount eventually comes ashore?
Okay, well that's kind of a part two from the Juan de Fuca plate question because the axial seamount is an underwater volcano that is out on that spreading ridge that I was talking about a few minutes ago. Uh, and I think the person asking the question is proud of themselves for knowing about the axial seamount, and props to you. I think there's a hot spot there, uh, like the Yellowstone hotspot or the Hawaiian hotspot. I think there's a hotspot underneath the axial seamount. And so as North America continues to inch closer and closer to the Juan de Fuca Ridge, which has the axial seamount on it, I guess the answer is that when North America crosses that last little piece of the Juan de Fuca plate and the Juan de Fuca Ridge, we'll have our newest arrival of a hotspot, which is going to start making volcanoes in Washington or maybe British Columbia. Just like, so Yellowstone used to be a hotspot out in the Pacific Ocean. It's now in Wyoming, but it used to be way out there. So it'll be a repeat of what we've already experienced with the Yellowstone hotspot, which once upon a time was in the Pacific and is now in cowboy country in Wyoming.
Might not be so fun for us that live here.
Like most of this stuff, if we can just, get a hot air balloon and just levitate above everything and just watch it all, it'd be a real blast. But I don't think we have that option, at
I
least not
mean,
now.
our place has like a front row seat to the next Mount Rainier eruption, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, are you right? Are you right in Seattle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Rainier, I think seems well, not my place to give hazard advice, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. You'll make sure you get the barbecue going when you watch that next event.
We'll have our go bag ready.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like the last question, I think.
Okay.
Somebody wants to know why subduction zones around the world are so different.
Well, for the general viewer right now, subduction zones are where you have an ocean plate that is diving beneath another tectonic plate. Sometimes it's truly an ocean plate diving beneath another ocean plate, And more commonly, it's a piece of ocean crust that's diving beneath a continent, like here in the Pacific Northwest. Are they really so different from each other? I don't know. I, from my mind, they're more similar than they are different. Each of these subduction zones around the world create these very, very scary magnitude 9 earthquakes. And that's been a major leap forward in understanding the risk and the cyclicity of those megaquakes. So that's bad. And that happens pretty much with every subduction zone around the world. You also create a volcanic arc similar to the Cascade. So that's also a similarity. So to answer the question, why are they so different? I guess the person asking the question knows about some subtle differences between the Marianas Trench and the Cascadia Trench and the Aleutian Trench. But I think I'm just going to answer the question the opposite way. I think there's such similar narratives, and we've learned so much in the last 50 years about our subduction zone that we are now better understanding other subduction zones around the world because they are so similar.
Nice. Well, I have
So,
questions about the next season.
oh, good.
Like, where are you going? Have you started planning it yet?
Well, the three of us just got together by Zoom. Gary Paul is the field producer, and Brady Lawrence is the very talented videographer and editor. And I don't think we've even officially gotten the green light yet, but it seems likely we're doing another season. I think that's the only word we've gotten. So yeah, we've made a little list, and I think I think we're going to try to film in March. Is that coming up, huh? Pretty
Yeah,
soon.
that's
We
next
picked
month.
So mid-March, we're hoping to go out to Friday Harbor and do a San Juan Island geology episode. That there's some cool stuff at Limekiln Point if we can get state parks to allow us to film, which is a whole nother story. But I think the easiest way to answer your question, thank you for the interest. I do like to pick programs based on what I've been thinking about most recently. And this winter, I've been doing 26 episodes on the Cascades, and I've learned an incredible amount up by Mount Rainier, up by Glacier Peak, up by Mount Baker. And I've got just a few letters left in this alphabet. And so we're already talking about trying to film in Mount Rainier National Park, looking at green rocks of the Ohanapakash Formation, or um, up back by Mount Baker, where there's incredible terrain. We're thinking about using an airplane with a friend of ours to film some kind of episode from the air. So that's
Nice.
those are some loose plans in the works, but we'll see what Brady, the videographer, is most excited about. He's very important to Sway. If he's excited, then we do it. If he's like, I did a little Google search. It doesn't look that sexy to me. It's like, all right,
It's got to
we'll
look
come
good
up
on
with
the drone.
yeah. He needs he needs enough. He not only needs scenery, he needs variable scenery. He needs different elements that he can capture instead of just one static mountain shot. And I totally understand that. So Gary and I try to feed him many different places, and then if he likes what he sees, then he signs off and we go for it.
Would you ever go as far south as Lassen, or are you trying to stick to just Washington and maybe Oregon?
It's an age-old question. How far beyond the state do we go? And I keep saying there's an unlimited number of episodes just in the state, and I like to just drive for a few hours and meet these guys out in the field, and that's convenient for me. But maybe it is time to start thinking a little bit beyond. You like Lassen, everybody has their favorite spot. We could do something crazy at Crater Lake and Oregon coast, and up in BC, there's all sorts of cool stuff that I know nothing about, but I have some friends who know a lot of geology up there. So maybe it's time, Allie. Maybe it's time that we get beyond the state, but we'll see what Sarah has to say about that.
I only plug Lassen because it's the one that I've been to with like the mo I've camped there and we hiked a lot. So I very much love that park. It was like going to Yellowstone without all the people.
Without all the people, I think that's part of the allure. I've heard this a lot over the years. I think part of the attraction to Lassen is they didn't really know about it. it wasn't as maybe it was for you, but for many, they're just on their way to somewhere else, and they're like, "Oh, this place is even better than the place we were planning on going." Like, how did I not know all this crazy, wonderful stuff that's here in Mount Lassen National Park, including an eruption less than 120 years ago? So, um, yeah, maybe it's worth it. I've only been there once, and I was like a moody teenager, so it's time for me to go back anyway. I'm
No, it's
still moody, but I'm no longer a teenager. Good.
my other question is more like about you. What got you into geology? What's your origin story?
It wasn't a professor. It wasn't a class. It wasn't any of the traditional reasons that people go into a field that they turn out to love. I ran out of money. I was at the University of Wisconsin and I was in school for 3 years and I couldn't find a major that excited me. And I literally ran out of money. And I was like, well, I guess I see this ad to work for a summer in Glacier National Park in Montana.
What?
And I pumped gas and worked in a general store with a bunch of other college kids from across the country. And I stayed till the end of the season, which was like late October of 1983. It's a long time ago. And I loved living in the mountains for the first time. And my bunkmate in our little bunk house for the workers was a geology student. And so we went on some hikes and he pointed a few things out. And I'm like, this stuff's cool. I'm going to go back to the University of Wisconsin and take 101. And I did. So it was a place that turned me on. It wasn't anything in a classroom. It was being in that beautiful area. Many people have good memories of Glacier National Park anyway, but every time I go back, those national parks don't change. It's like you're walking right into your past. The smells are all the same. Everything's the same. I worked in Lake McDonald Lodge in the summer of 1983 when I turned 21 years old. And I will always remember that summer. It's just a life-changing experience because I was ready for it. I was just hungry for something that got me excited. So thank you, Glacier National Park in Montana.
Oh, that's awesome. So then did that make you want to come out here?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I finished a geology degree pretty quickly, and I remember graduating in Madison, Wisconsin, thinking that I picked the wrong major. I, I wasn't that into it, but I moved out here, and then I was in grad school, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is totally it. I totally love this. But it was being out here and living and doing all this hands-on stuff. That's what did it for me. And so yeah, that's the reason I'm out here is that summer in Montana, and then I knew I just wanted to live in the Pacific Northwest the rest of my life. That's
Nice.
turning out to be the case.
Yay. Well, that was that was all my questions.
Thank
That was
you.
everybody's questions.
Well, good. Yes. Well, I appreciate you. I don't know if this was your idea or someone else suggested this, but it was a good idea to just do a little Q&A.
Yeah, it was fun. We're trying to do more like behind the scenes and like bonus stuff for our shows. So
Cool.
you were the experiment.
Nice. I'm happy to be the guinea pig anytime you want to try something new.
Thank you. I will keep that in mind. You might regret it.
No, no.